Welcome to Active Intel live video weekly event where you can speak and ask questions to a licensed private investigator. Today we're going to talk in great detail about Ponzi schemes. We got a lot of questions from customers. What goes on behind the scenes of a Ponzi scheme? This might help give you some insight into how to get funds recovered from a Ponzi scheme, how to identify the people of a Ponzi scheme. But first, a note about our last video event. Last video event, we talked about recovering hidden assets or abandoned assets. And we've had a lot of really good comments from viewers who have used some of the tools to get money that was already in their name. Jeffrey used the Florida tool to get money back that was an abandoned account. Another viewer who wants to remain anonymous, initials M, she found money instantly that was in her name using that same tool. So it's a really good resource. There may be money just sitting there that belongs to you. So make sure that you avail yourself of those. So I'm going to jump right in and talk about what goes on behind the scenes of a Ponzi scheme and why it's so volatile and dangerous to be a victim or an investor in a Ponzi scheme. We're going to use a really simple little mock-up here to show what a Ponzi scheme looks like. It's a really simple little spreadsheet. And our Ponzi scheme is a fictitious company called XYZ Investment Scheme LLC. This is a fictitious company. If there's a real company out there called XYZ Investment Scheme LLC, I feel sorry for picking that name, but for you picking that name, you shouldn't have scheme in your name because it may not sound really good. But this is a fictitious company. It doesn't mean anything bad about any particular company, or it doesn't pertain to an actual real organization. So keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is as you're reviewing any documents for an investment that you have or somebody asking you for money, you may want to consider getting good legal advice from an attorney. This video is designed to give you suggestions on understanding a supposed investment and how to identify a Ponzi scheme, but it doesn't represent all the legal considerations you may have. So here we go. XYZ Investment Scheme LLC. Usually a Ponzi scheme will solicit money from an investor for the purpose of getting a higher return. Usually it's, hey, give us $10,000 and we'll pay you 10% a month, or we'll pay you $1,000 a month, or whatever the case might be. In some instances, the Ponzi scheme is supposedly backed by some type of inventory. Hey, if you give us $10,000, we're going to buy inventory that'll be worth $50,000 in 6 months. Or real estate. We have a viewer user that talked about a Ponzi scheme that they ran into. They sent money through wire transfer through two legitimate banks, Wells Fargo and Bank of America. Turns out the recipient behind the wire transfer was a total scam. And the banks really can't help too much unless you get deep into court proceedings. So here's how a Ponzi scheme might work. Let's say that XYZ Investments Scheme LLC goes to investor we'll call Joe and says, hey, look, Joe, if you give us $10,000, we'll pay you, let's say they're offering 10% a month, right? Let's say that's their rate of return. And we'll talk later about how these percentages are unsustainable and why high percent investments are usually an indication. So 10% a month. So what does Joe do? Joe sends $10,000 in to XYZ Investment Scheme LLC. Now, the money's there. He gets a statement, just like you get a bank statement that says, hey, look, this is how much money you have in your account, in quotes, with us. Remember, XYZ Investment Scheme LLC, anybody can print up a statement. Just like if you went to a lumber yard to buy materials, they'll give you a statement of what you bought. So just because it's printed on a piece of paper doesn't mean it's official or legal. You want to verify that these funds exist. So your money supposedly in this investment, you have $10,000. Now, they promise to pay you 10% a month. Well, at the end of the next month, They send you another statement, and now your statement says you have $11,000 in that account. Well, that's great. If it was a bank account through a legitimate bank, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, you could pretty much count on the fact that that money's going to be there because it's backed by the federal government and it's regulated and it's FDIC and many other things. XYZ Investment Scheme LLC, you don't know what's behind that investment. So let's say another month goes by and they send them another statement, $12,000 instead of 10. Well, that sounds great. 2 months, I've already made $2,000. Well, what if Joe, the investor, decides, well, I don't necessarily want to just have my account go up. I want actual money. I want cash, right? Instead of just having a piece of paper with the number going up, I want that $1,000 in my pocket every month so I can pay bills, I can buy things, I can use it for lifestyle. So let's go back and go back to the original scenario where Joe had $10,000. And at the end of the first month, instead of his account going up to 11, Joe says, no, send me my 10% a month in cash every month. So now we're going to put a notation over here under payable that now XYZ Investment Scheme LLC has to pay Joe his $1,000 every month. Let's assume that this is not a real company. This is just an investment scam or a Ponzi scheme. In order to pay Joe his $1,000, the only money they have is the money that came from Joe. So they're going to take $1,000 from Joe's money and they're going to pay it to Joe. All right, that's his money for the month. And Joe's probably going to spend it. He paid his own money. However, his account is still going to show $10,000. When he gets his statement at the end of the next month, it's still going to say 10,000. They're not going to show that the money came from that. They're going to show it was an increase. So let's say that sometime during that month, Joe tells his friend Mary, or maybe XYZ Investment Scheme does advertising or is on social media or on Instagram or Facebook, or even we've seen some of these schemes do radio ads. Okay. And they convince Mary to do the same thing. Well, Mary says, well, gee, if I can get 10% a month, I'll give you $10,000. So now Mary puts in her money, okay, and she now has a statement of $10,000. Well, now here's the thing. Now XYZ Investments has to pay Mary her money. At the end of the next month, let's go back and delete this because this isn't real. Okay, this is which is showing on a statement. Remember, Joe's account is down now to 9,000 because they paid him 1,000. At the end of the next month, Mary says, well, I don't want my 1,000 to go on my statement as a higher amount. I want my money too. So now at the end of the next month, they have to pay Mary her 1,000 and they have to pay Joe his 1,000. Okay. So even though their statements are still showing magically $10,000, we'll put a little line here to show what their statements are showing, their actual account balance is going down. Okay. This is a very common scenario. We're going to put it in another color so we can see what their statement shows. Their statement shows 10,000, but the actual money that this company has in their pocket is 8,000 and 9,000. So guess what? You can probably figure out what we're going to do next. We're going to say that the following month, Steve now puts in money into this fund. Okay, so now Steve has $10,000 in the fund. Well, at the end of the third month, you can see what's going to happen. Everybody's got to get their 1,000. Steve's going to get his 1,000. Okay. Mary's going to get her 1,000. Joe's going to get his 1,000. Okay. Now, remember, they're still seeing a statement that shows $10,000, but in reality, The money is dwindling. Okay, you can see what's happening with this money. Let's take a little pause here. Why does a company do this? Well, companies sometimes start out with the intention of doing a Ponzi scheme from day one. See all this money, all this green money? They can spend this in the meantime, right? Sometimes a company starts out as actually trying to do business and make a profit, and their revenues go up. But sometimes things happen. Maybe the profits weren't as good as they thought they were going to be. Maybe the market changes. Maybe there's competitors, and sometimes people will resort to a Ponzi scheme after the fact when the business model didn't work. So let's fast forward 4 months from now. Okay. Joe is going to get 4 months worth of payments. One, 2, 3, 4. Let's fast forward 5 months. Okay. Mary is going to fast forward 5 payments. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And Steve, the same thing. We won't belabor the issue. We'll do it this way. Okay. Now remember, they're all still showing in their account statement that they're getting from this company that they have $10,000. The reason I say that is you might be thinking, well, what are they losing? Because they're getting their money back. Yeah, they're getting their money back $1,000 at a time, but they're not realizing that their account statement of 10,000 is not accurate. It's not real. Okay. So you can see what's happening to the money. It's dwindling. In reality, it's dwindling faster than that because we've been into this only 6 months so far, 6 or 7 months. We've not taken any money from this investment for expenses. Somebody at XYZ Investment Scheme LLC has to be on payroll to write these checks, to do the advertising. They might have rent. They might have utilities. They probably have a phone bill, electric bill. If they're advertising on TV or Facebook or Instagram, that costs money. So in the course of 6 months, it might have cost, even if it cost $2,000 a month for all of those things, which it probably costs more than that. Payroll by itself is probably $1,000 a week, right? But let's just say $6,000 a month was eaten up because of expenses of that company. So there's 2, there's 3, there's 5 total, and there is 6. Now you can see from this that Joe's money and Mary's money is all gone. Steve's money is just barely hanging on in the account, and Joe, Mary, and Steve are all thinking they have $10,000, right? They're still thinking that they have an account with $10,000 in it because that is what is being sent to the investors as a statement. Okay, follow this so far? And this is simple. This is only 3 investors. Now, at the end of the next month, Joe, Mary, and Steve are going to be looking for their $3,000 payments. XYZ Investment Scheme LLC looks in their bank account. They only have $3,000 left. That money's all going to go to Joe, Mary, and Steve. So what they now have to do is say, hey, we need to get more investors because all the money that's coming in, they're not selling any products. They're not selling any services. All the money's coming from future investments. So they go to Susan and they advertise and they say, hey, we'll give you 10% return on your investment. Let's do it this way. Put $10,000 in this account. Susan says, okay, I'll do that. Now they add Susan to the list of people they got to pay. So at the end of the next month, Joe gets money out of Steve's account. Mary gets money out of Steve's account. Susan gets money out of Steve's account. And really, Steve gets money out of Susan's account. Okay, so you can see what's happened here. The money is going away quickly. The problem is the bigger this scheme gets, the faster the money goes away. And because of that, a Ponzi scheme enterprise has to get new investors very, very quickly. They have to put new investors on board fast because now they have 4 alligators eating up resources, right? They have Joe, Mary, Steve, and Susan all looking for their $1,000 every month, and they only have one account left to go. I mean, 2 months and it's gone. So they go to Benjamin and they say, "Hey, Benjamin, right? Put $10,000 in the account. We will pay you $1,000 a month." And they go to Laura and they tell her the same thing, and they get Laura to put $10,000 in the account. And again, this may come from social media. This may come from sometimes they advertise on the radio. You hear a lot of investments on the radio. Some are legit, maybe some aren't. So they're out beating the bushes. In some cases, they even say, "Hey, look, we'll raise our rate. We'll give you 15% a month." But that just means they have to send 1,500 instead of 1,000. When you're desperate for new investors as a Ponzi scheme, you'll offer anything you can to get new money coming in because it really doesn't matter because it's not going anywhere, right? So we're into this, 7, 8 months now. And now we have 6 investors. So the next month, you're going to have 4 people. Well, no, we have more than that now, don't we? We have Benjamin. And we have Laura. Each of those investors, so-called investors, which are really victims, are now looking for their monthly investments. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 payments from Susan's account. Pays that off, right? And where are you at now? Well, there's only 2 investors really that have any money that's been put in that's still remaining. And you can see where this goes. If you have 6 investors, how many $1,000 left in the account? 1, 2, 3. You have 32. Well, that's 5 months and it's all gone. Now, what's even worse is when this money is all gone or dwindled, and again, we're not really accounting for any more expenses of this company, right? We're not counting on the fact that this company has payroll, it has rent, it has advertising. Because if you're out there trying to get more money from people, you're going to need a salesperson. You're paying commission. No one's going to be out there talking to investors for free, the closing deals, if they're any good, to get people to send you $10,000. Think of the ads you see on TV, for things like car insurance, for banking, for life insurance. They spend a lot of money on those things. And when you go to buy it, you're paying somebody a commission. And those are actual legitimate products. How good of a salesperson do they need to have to convince all these people to put money into something that really has no track record, right? The expenses are high. So what happens now is you get maybe a year into it and all the money's drained out. The next month you have 6 payments left, 6 payments due, and you only have 5 payments worth of money in the bank, not counting your expenses. So what you do is you tell your 6 investors, "Hey, guess what? Payments are going to be a little late this month." And they'll make up an excuse. Coronavirus could be an excuse. The markets could be an excuse. Internet went down could be an excuse. Somebody got sick. There's always an excuse. As soon as that happens, that is when the beginning of the end of a Ponzi scheme starts to happen. And you can usually get some people to go without their payment. Maybe you can get, Joe, Mary, and Steve to be on hold because, you know what? I've been getting payments really good for the last 6 or 8 months. So I trust these people if they're gonna be late 1 month. But the new ones, Susan, Benjamin, and Laura, they might not let you be late. So maybe you can get away with paying 3 of these payments left that you only have 5 payments in your bank balance. Well, it doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of time. However many people you can get to delay just delays the inevitable. And you might say, well, what about getting more investors? Sure, you can scroll over here to the right and add on more investors. The problem is the more investors you add, it actually accelerates the process because now you have more payments to pay out. More investors doesn't help you, it actually hurts you because you actually have more payments. So now you have a company that has taken in $50,000 that technically these people think they have coming to them because they think their principal is still there, $10,000. So when the Ponzi scheme blows up, you have, in this case, 6 people, and that's actually 60,000, not 50,000, 6 people that are going to be looking to get their $60,000 back. And of course, the company's not going to have it. So what they'll do is they'll go out of business, they'll close, they'll shut down their website, they'll block text, they'll block email, and now you have a blown up Ponzi scheme. How big can a Ponzi scheme get? Well, you had the Bernie Madoff case, billions of dollars. You had Scott Rothstein in Florida, and you have small ones. You have cases where somebody says, "Look, send me $500 for a Bitcoin scam. Send me $1,000 for some real estate investment." Right? So Ponzi schemes can be very big. They can be very small. They can be sophisticated or very simple. The common element behind all Ponzi schemes is there's really nothing making the growth happen. I mean, what's supposed to happen is the money's supposed to grow here because the business is doing something to generate profits, right? Another way you can tell a Ponzi scheme is when the rate of return is very high. Maybe 10% doesn't sound that high of a return, but 10% is actually in a year more than 100%. So you're doubling your money in less than a year. Any business that is a legitimate business that could double money in a year, net profit, not revenue, but net profit, is doing pretty good. Most businesses that operate on a healthy margin, maybe make 10, 15, 20%, maybe 25% a year. And if they paid all that out to investors, they would have nothing. There'd be no reason to run the business. Most legitimate businesses can also borrow from a bank at very low rates. Right now, the bank rates are 1, 2, 3% for some kinds of borrowing. Mortgages are 3%. So if you have a business, XYZ Investment Scheme LLC, that supposedly has some business model that says, hey, we can pay you 10% a month. If the business is that good, why do not the executives or owners of this company have a lot of cash saved up? Because if they've been making 10% a month or more for the last year, 2 or 3, they should have plenty of cash built up where they don't need to be asking you for their money. And if they did have that kind of cash built up, they'd put their own money in. They wouldn't want to give it away to somebody else. So do your due diligence on a Ponzi scheme, and you'll avoid being one of these people that wakes up 6, 8, 10 months later and finds out your money is gone because the investment scheme has disappeared. The person you sent your money to, they're blocking your email. You're not getting any responses, and the money you thought you had in principal is gone. Sometimes you might not even take out any payments. You might just let your account ride up, but many people are taking out payments. So that's what crushes the finances of a Ponzi scheme. And this is just a very simple example. 6 investors, 10% a month. Some investments offer higher or slightly lower rates. Some investments have thousands of investors that have sent in millions of dollars. The math is still going to be the same. It's just going to have more zeros. Instead of being 1,000, it could be 100,000. It could be 1 million. Instead of being 7,000, it could be 700,000 or 7 million. The numbers don't matter if they're bigger or smaller. The rate of decline is going to be the same. The more investors you have, the more payable monthly notes you have. Even if the notes are quarterly or annual, that money's going to come due. And the cash is the lifeblood of a Ponzi scheme, and the only way they can get more cash is to add more people to this list, right? And if you add more people to this list of investors over here, you also have to add them to the list of payables, and it just accelerates the process. In reality, the last $1,000 payment that Joe got over here came from Susan or Benjamin. It didn't come from any kind of business growth or business operation. It came from one of the newer investors. So that's how a Ponzi scheme works behind the scenes. This is exactly what a Ponzi scheme operator will look at for an accounting, is exactly who put money in, where's the money going, and they just look at their account balance. If these represent thousands of dollars, they're going to look at their bank account and say, we have $5,000 in the bank, but we owe $6,000 in payments this month, and we can't make all the payments. It doesn't matter if it's 5 million, then this would be 6 million. If it doesn't matter if it's 60 million, right? The percentages are the same. Ponzi schemes usually crush about the same period of time because of operating costs. Again, not all the money is going to investors. You have to remember, the reason that a Ponzi schemer does this is not just to break even. What they're doing is they're taking out the cash and they're buying Ferraris, going on trips, eating out to dinner, buying real estate, buying jewelry. A lot of it's squandered. So you have to remember, a lot of this cash isn't just going right to these investors in payments. A lot of it's going for the Ponzi schemer to live a high, luxurious life. In fact, you've never seen a convicted Ponzi schemer that didn't have the last few years living luxury. They usually make a point on the news stories or the American Greed stories to show that they had Ferraris and mansions and racehorses and all kinds of luxury goods. And that's where this money goes. So we didn't even account for any money going to those squandered lifestyle choices of the operator, right? All we did was show just the basic math of it going to these victims. When you factor in the fact that the Ponzi schemer is using this money for a reason, they did this for a reason, not just to do an exercise in mathematics. They did it to live a high luxury life without having to do any work, without having to run a business. All they have to do is get people's money and shuffle it around. So the Ponzi scheme usually crushes a lot faster than it would ordinarily because that the operator, the scammer, can't help themselves from taking out money for their own purpose. Hopefully that gives you a good example of the behind the scenes of a Ponzi scheme. There are quite a bit of examples of this happening, and if you look at any of the news stories that came out, for recent Ponzi schemes, if you read between the lines, you will see that layout of the finances and accounting of a Ponzi scheme within the news story. That the newer investors were paid by, or the older investors were paid by newer investors. The person lived that high luxury, and there was a high rate of return. If you look at any news story, it's going to show all those elements. And typically, a Ponzi scheme can operate on average for 2 to 4 years before it crushes. Sometimes they go longer. The Bernie Madoff case was decades, right? Because they kept getting new investors. If you have a very good marketing scheme or very high credibility authority, you can get new investors, and you can keep a Ponzi scheme going as long as you keep getting new investors into your scheme. As soon as the investors stop, it dries up, because in some cases, all the money from one new investor pays all the old investors, and it's gone in 1 month. So if you're the last investor in, you put in 10,000, that money might all be gone in 1 month to pay for prior investors. So the scam is always looking for that next opportunity. And a lot of times that comes from marketing or advertising. And if you see a scam getting desperate, that's the reason why. So I appreciate your interest in that subject. Again, if you have questions, you can email our help desk, help@activeintel.com. We'll put the questions on for the next live video. And definitely subscribe if you want to know when our next video will be going live, because we do these at least once a week, sometimes more. And usually they're not planned too far in advance. So if you see the little notification in your email. That means we have one coming up, and you'll get that if you hit the subscribe button and become a member of the channel.